Hello there, welcome back to another review. Today we're going to be looking at Mortal Kombat, one of my favourite films from the mid-90s, made in 1995, directed by Paul Anderson, most famously for doing such as the film adaptation of the Resident Evil series. He done most recently the film adaptation of Monster Hunter. He also done Event Horizon with Lawrence Fishburne and Sam Neill. But so we'll be getting into Mortal Kombat today. Why, in my opinion, it's still one of the best video game adaptations we've ever seen. Why I'm still love this film. Why it's so beloved. Why it's become sort of a cult favourite to so many people. And in my eyes, just why it still is, not to bash the reboot, the remake, but why I still feel it is a superior film in many ways. And yeah, just my opinions, what I thought on the film. It's one of them films that I used to rent continuously from the video shop when I was a kid. I used to rent this all the time. Having seen like Street Fighter the previous year, I was not too enthralled by like another video game like beat 'em up film at the time. I like because Street Fighter just left me feeling so flat and so sort of they don't get it, they don't understand like how to they have this source material and they don't know how to project it onto film. They even at a young age, they just don't understand what they need to do. Mortal Kombat, this film, does that perfectly. It really gives you everything you want from a Mortal Kombat movie. All like the characters look the way you envisioned them to look. The locations look right. Everything about it just screams Mortal Kombat from start to finish. It's like they knew what kind of film they were setting out to make. They knew who their target audience was. And that's what they did with this film. They just really went for it. They gave us what we wanted. And that's why I still love this film even to this day. It's still, because it ticks so many boxes. And I think it even still ticks more boxes than what the reboot did. And I know a lot of people at the time were sort of not bashing this film, but they were giving it a bit of flack because especially the hardcore fans, they were saying like it's not violent enough. There's not as much violence and gore in this film as there should be. You have to remember, like, Mortal Kombat's target audience was sort of 10 to 13-year-old kids. So they was never going to make it that violent because they want people to come and see their film, But if you look at, say, the reboot, the remake of this film compared to this film, I mean, they're both rated the same here in the UK. But the level of violence and the language in the new version is, compared to this, this looks like a kid's film in comparison compared to the amount of blood, violence and gore that's in the reboot, and it's proved how much times have changed and how much cinema has changed and how much we've just got used to violence and, whether it's in video games or whatever. But as I say, at the time there was, as we all know, there was a big hoo-ha about Mortal Kombat and violence in video games and that kind of thing. I mean, with this film, at the time, watching it like 9, 10 years old, people saying it wasn't that violent. To me, being 9, 10 years old, it was more than enough. It satisfied my craving for some blood and fight sequences, and there's a bit of gore here and there, but there's not too much, and it's done in sort of a fun way. So when I was younger, I used to play Mortal Kombat all the time. I mean, I was especially Mortal Kombat 1 to 2, 1 and 2. Didn't play 3 overly that much, but 1 and 2 especially. I remember I had a Super Nintendo. I had Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. My friend had a Mega Drive or a Genesis. And he had Mortal Kombat there. And we always used to play the Mega Drive version over the SNES version because obviously the SNES version didn't get a good port of Mortal Kombat 1 because it was censored so much. And you're playing half the fun of playing Mortal Kombat. Was for the blood, was for the gore. SNES, Nintendo being who they are, decided, we're not having that. Mortal Kombat 2, they were fine with it. But we used to always play the Mega Drive version of Mortal Kombat 1. I just absolutely loved it. So when a film adaptation was coming out, bearing in mind, like I say, video game adaptations, as we know, even to this day, they've never been done perfectly. There's always something a bit where they change the source material, or that's a bit different, or that character, that's totally different to how they are in the games, that kind of thing. With this Mortal Kombat movie, what they do here, which I think is why a lot of people love it so much, is they respect what John Tobias and Ed Boon had already put in front of them. They respect the source material, they respect the characters, they respect what this franchise is, and I think that's very, very important. I mean, you can, like I say, nowadays everybody takes license with certain things. They change this and that to give it a different version of this kind of thing, and sometimes people don't want that. They want what they expect to see. They want the characters to look like they expect them to see. They want the plot to follow them certain key notes them certain beats that they expect it to follow, that kind of thing. But going back to this film, I mean, regarding like martial arts cinema and kung fu movies, I mean, this was one of my first sort of tournament kung fu martial art films I'd ever seen. I mean, up to this point, being a kid, you know, I mainly grew up on sort of Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, that kind of thing. I may have seen a couple of Jackie Chans at this point, but this was sort of the first film I saw, especially a Western film, where I saw some kick-ass fight sequences, and it just, the whole thing was just like from start to finish doesn't stop. There's not one boring scene. Everything about it was just, there was just so much in this movie. There was so much that made it such a fantastic, fun popcorn action flick, regardless of whether it's a video game adaptation or not. I mean, you could even take that element out of it. It really does just serve its purpose for what it sets out to do. I mean, the cast, locations, the look, the feel, the dialogue, the music, the fight sequences, they all work. It all works together. It all comes together perfectly in harmony. It really does paint like an hour, 40 minutes of just pure entertainment. They got the mythology and the lore right, which is what I think is important. I mean, I know Mortal Kombat's sort of story and lore wasn't sort of as concrete then as what it is now. There was still the idea of the tournament, and I know John Tobias and Ed Boon, when they were creating it, they were influenced by such things as Enter the Dragon and Big Trouble in Little China and that kind of thing. But as I say, this film, that it's not like that. The story was still in place. There were like comic books at this point and things like that. But what this film done was it took them things and said, right, let's respect that and put it on the live action screen. There might have been little things they changed or little nuances they sort of tweaked or little things like that. But overall, the general thing is it's still respected where its source material come from. So like Robin Shou, Lyndon Ashby, Kerry Tagawa, Christopher Lambert all fill their roles perfectly in this film. Especially Robin Shou as Liu Kang, absolutely perfect casting. Kerry Tagawa as Shang Tsung is Shang Tsung, there's no two ways about it. Christopher Lambert is there sort of a star power, you know, obviously famous from the Highlander films. But, you know, you only need to look at the recent like Mortal Kombat 11 with the character skins and the voice patches, voice lines they've got some of the cast doing from this movie doing. It proves how much legacy this film has and how much it really has impacted on the Mortal Kombat fan base and the fans of the franchise. I mean, just everything about it, like even I think, you know, they had the base story of what John Tobias and Ed Boon has sort of set out, and this film even added things into the lore that are still even relevant today, like the idea of Kano being Australian, the idea of Outworld having to win 10 tournaments in a row, that kind of thing. This was a film that sort of it took some stuff, but it also gave some things back which have now become part of the sort of traditional Mortal Kombat lore. I'd say the characters were there, all the characters were there that you wanted from the first game, and it takes elements from Mortal Kombat 2. This is why Mortal Kombat is beloved so much, though. It's not just the fight sequences, it's not just the blood and guts, it's the story, it's the legacy, it's the lore, it's the story behind, you know, what is the story behind everything that's going on is just as interesting as the fight sequences that are going on and all the blood and guts flying around. You know, a lot of the cast, I think I read somewhere that ad-libbed a lot of their lines. I think the line where Johnny Cage says, you know, thank God I didn't ask him to park the car, I think that was just made up on the spot. So, like I say, you really get the impression there was sort of a freedom and a fun here with this film. Like, you know, they knew what they were doing, let's have fun, let's go for it. And I know a lot of people, you know, I've got so much to say about this film. I'm just trying to sort of condense it into one sort of little mini review. I know a lot of, like many people cite like The Matrix and The Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, sort of them kind of films as bringing sort of Hong Kong action to the mainstream sort of Western audiences. But in my mind, it was sort of Robin Shou and sort of Paul Anderson that done it sort of like 4 years earlier in 1995 with Mortal Kombat. Because Robin Shou was like a Hong Kong action star, right? I mean, he wasn't huge, but I remember he was in Tiger Cage 2 with Donnie Yen, directed by Yuen Woo-ping. You know, he was like a Hong Kong stunt guy. He knew martial arts, he knew how to film a fight sequence, that kind of thing. I know Pat Johnson is credited as directing like the choreographer and the fight sequences on this film, who you may know as sort of the referee from Karate Kid. He also has sort of supporting roles in like Enter the Dragon, done by Robert Klaus, Big Brawl with Jackie Chan with Robert Klaus. And I think he'd done the choreography on Turtles 2, I think, Secret of the Ooze. But I know he's sort of credited as being the fight choreographer for this film, but I'm pretty sure Robin Shou had a lot to do, with the fight sequences and the way they were, you know, sort of mapped out and planned. I mean, if you look at, say, like for an example, if you look at the fight sequence between Shang Tsung and Liu Kang at the end, compared to say the fight sequence between Liu Kang and Reptile. They're two like totally different fight sequences. The whole feel and rhythm of them is totally different. Like you can tell, like Pat Johnson had a bit more to do with the end fight sequence than what Robin Shou did, and they're just two totally different fight sequences. Also, by the way, that fight sequence against Reptile, played by Keith Cook. That's one of my, first time I saw that, I was like, this is off the chain insane. This is absolutely, although the whole Reptile scene doesn't make too much sense, like Liu Kang's walking with Johnny Cage and then Reptile gets thrown into this sort of skeleton warrior in Outworld, and then the announcer from the game says Reptile, and you love that. It's so cool and awesome, that bit. But then they kicks through a wall. They have an amazing fight sequence. Where Johnny Cage is during this moment, I have no idea. I don't know why he didn't rush to help Liu Kang, but it's a fantastic action scene. As well as the Johnny Cage Scorpion fight sequence. Really seeing that when you're like 9 years old, seeing your characters that you played on a video game come to life, absolutely incredible. Really amazing stuff. But going back to the reboot, in my honest opinion, this is still much better than the 2021. The reboot was okay, and there was like just nothing. It's just there was nothing memorable about the reboot for me. I don't know, say if it was maybe nostalgia kicking in. Maybe it's because I just have such a fondness for the 1995 version. But there was just nothing that stood out for this film. Goro didn't look nowhere near as good. Goro in this film is a great big like walking sort of puppet. He's tangible. He's real. He's there. He's on set. Goro in the new film, just CGI as always in like most films are nowadays. And it's just, you can't, when something is really there and on set, even if it's like sometimes a bit stiff in movement, I'd still sometimes much prefer that than just a CGI Goro, And my main gripe with the reboot, I will review the reboot, and I do like it, but my main gripe with it was just like there was no sort of memorable fight sequences in it. There was no, with the original, like this one, you think, oh yeah, the Reptile Liu Kang fight sequence, or, even like the Liu Kang Sub-Zero fight sequence, anything like that. But with this, they all sort of roll into one. There's no sort of, with the new one, there's no sort of fight sequences that stand out from one or the other. So it was just very sort of, the best thing about the reboot to me was Joe Taslim was Sub-Zero, who I thought was absolutely incredible in the part, and Cabal. I thought that like them two were just amazing. But it was a shame because I had such high hopes for the film, and I can't wait to see what they do with the second one. But like adding Carl Young into it and all that, well, I'll get into that another time. But talk about the 1995 version. I'd say the film does take some liberties somewhere. Sometimes it's not entirely sort of concrete on the lore. As I say, the lore was still expanding over time. There was still more to come with in reference to the lore and new characters added over the years to come. Now the lore and mythos behind it is so deep. Mortal Kombat. It really is. It does take some liberties, such as choosing the easy route with Scorpion and Sub-Zero. It doesn't go into the history of them. It doesn't explain like the rivalry that their two clans have. Shang Tsung just explains at one point in the film the deadliest of enemies. He explains they are deadliest of enemies, but they're slaves under his power. And in many ways, although that's a bit of a disservice to Scorpion and Sub-Zero, in a way it does work in the context of the film because there's that mystery there. You're thinking, who are these ninjas? Why are they enemies? And the film never expands or explains on that. But I do like sometimes when things are sort of left up to, if you knew the lore behind Mortal Kombat, you would know why they are enemies, that kind of thing. But it does work without, like, there's Sub-Zero, there's Scorpion. They look exactly how they're meant to look. Job done. They knew they didn't need to necessarily go as far as that because. Obviously, as I say, 1995, the Mortal Kombat roster wasn't exactly huge at this point. Obviously, a sequel was obviously in mind if the film was successful, and we will get probably into Mortal Kombat Annihilation in another video. But I think the idea was to sort of do another one. If it's successful, do another one. Keep it going. But I'd say the lore wasn't as expansive as it is now. But I think although Scorpion and Sub-Zero maybe they got the short straw in this film compared to some of the other characters, like I say, Goro looks fantastic, Shang Tsung looks fantastic. I think Jade was actually meant to be in this film originally. I think Sonya was meant to fight Jade, but the scene was cut or something like that, or they didn't have time to film it, budget constraints or something like that. It'd have been great to have seen Jade, but it mainly takes elements from Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. But yeah, it adds to the mystery of Scorpion and Sub-Zero. I mean, them two obviously being the most beloved, two of the most beloved characters from the franchise, and that's one thing the reboot I think done well for the fans, is they made it like the whole story sort of mainly about Sub-Zero and Scorpion, making that sort of the focus. But yeah, I still prefer this one. I still do prefer this one. Like I keep saying, it's not to say the reboot's a bad movie. It's really not. And, it's still a very good Mortal Kombat film. But this, to me, just like I say, the nostalgia and just what it sort of, what it is, and just how many times I've seen it, and I sort of know the dialogue by heart. It's still one of my favourites. It still really is one of my favourites. And if you haven't seen it, just go and check out the original. It's still the best live action. I still think it's one of the best video game adaptations that's ever happened. I still think it's one of the best ones ever done, because, like I say, they just respected the source material. They respected the source material. It looks the way you intend it to look. The soundtrack's awesome. Everybody looks the part, and it just works on so many levels. But as I say, maybe I've just got my nostalgia glasses on. But anyway, that's my review of Mortal Kombat. Hope you enjoyed.